You are in a tunnel. Forget the sky. Forget the sun. You are 1,000 feet under the scorched red earth of the Sinai desert, entombed in the planet's crust. The year is somewhere around 1550 BC. The air itself is a physical weight. It's thick, choked with the metallic tang of copper dust that cakes your throat and the sweet, resinous smoke of a single, sputtering oil lamp. It's hot. Not the clean heat of the desert above, but a wet, suffocating heat that leaches the strength from your bones and clings to your skin like a shroud. The only light in this suffocating blackness is the weak, dancing flame of that lamp, casting monstrous shadows that writhe on the tunnel walls. The only sound is the rhythmic scrape, a sharp, deliberate grinding of a bronze tool against limestone. Let's zoom in on that sound. It's not a miner's pickaxe. It's something smaller, more precise. A man, his face a mask of soot and sweat, is carving something. His name is lost to us. His story, his family, his dreams, all ground to dust by 35 centuries of silence. He is anonymous. He is, in the grand sweep of Egyptian history, a nobody. But what he is doing in this moment will echo louder than any pharaoh's decree. He isn't carving a tribute to a king. He isn't drawing a picture of a hawk-headed god. He is focused on a loose flake of rock, braced against his knee. With a sharpened point, he scores 4 small, crude shapes, scratched with no more force than you'd use to press a thumbnail into clay. Lamed. Bet. Ayin. Lamed. Tav. LBLT to the lady. A simple prayer. A piece of whispered graffiti in the crushing silence of the deep earth. It should have been meaningless. It should have been forgotten, stepped on, and ground back into the dust from which it came. But it wasn't. Because what this nameless man carved was not a picture. It was a piece of code. A key. It was the first shot fired in a silent revolution that would completely, irrevocably, rewire the human brain. This humble scratch in the dark was a weapon. It was a tool that would allow human thought to escape the prison of the skull, to outlive the body, to travel faster than ships and further than armies. This was not just writing. This was a hack. A way to distill the infinite complexity of language into a handful of symbols. A system so brutally efficient it would topple the information monopoly of empires, build new worlds of commerce, science, and poetry, and its ghost would end up right here, encoded in the screen you're watching and under the thumbs you use to navigate your life. So how? How did a handful of mouth shapes, invented by an illiterate worker in a forgotten mine, outperform the grand temples and the genius scribes of the most powerful civilization on Earth? How did 22 simple signs hack human memory and teach our ideas how to reproduce themselves? We need to treat this like a cold case. The clues are buried in the desert dust. The witnesses are 3,500 years dead. But the evidence is literally everywhere. So grab a torch. We're going deep. This is the autopsy of the alphabet. To understand the brilliance of this hack, you first have to understand the system it was designed to break. First rule of any investigation, know your enemy. And in 1550 BC, if you were an idea, your enemy was the writing system. Imagine you want to send a text message. But instead of tapping out a few letters, you have to draw a detailed, multi-layered comic strip for every single word. A strip with specific rules about which drawings mean what, which drawings mean sounds, and which drawings are silent clues telling you how to interpret the other drawings. That, in a nutshell, was the majestic, beautiful, and crushingly complex system of Egyptian hieroglyphics. To become a scribe in ancient Egypt was to enlist in an intellectual army. You would enter scribal school as a boy, and you would not emerge for a decade, sometimes more. Your life would be a grueling routine of memorization. Not 26 letters. Not 50. Not 100. Over 1,000 common hieroglyphs, with thousands more for archaic, religious, or specialized texts. You had to master logograms, signs that stood for an entire word, like drawing a sun to mean sun. You had to master phonograms, signs that stood for sounds. And you had to master determinatives, the truly tricky part, silent symbols placed at the end of a word to tell the reader its category. Is that star symbol the word star, or the name of the god, Ra, or is it telling you the preceding word belongs to the category of celestial bodies? Only a trained scribe knew for sure. This wasn't a writing system, it was a fortress. It was designed, consciously or not, to keep people out. It created an elite class, a tiny percentage of the population who held the keys to information itself. They were the kingdom's memory. They wrote the histories, tallied the grain, recorded the laws, and inscribed the prayers. Knowledge wasn't a public library, it was a guarded vault. And the scribes were the only ones with the combination. Power was centralized. The flow of information was strictly top-down. The pharaoh and the priest spoke, and the scribes wrote it down. For everyone else, the written word was just magic, beautiful and meaningless patterns on a temple wall. Now, back to our tunnel. The mines at Rewrote el-khadim were an Egyptian state operation, digging for precious turquoise. But the Egyptians weren't doing the backbreaking labor. That was left to conscripts and hired workers from the Levant, Canaanites, speakers of an early Semitic language. Imagine being one of these miners. Every day you are surrounded by the writing of your employers. You see these intricate, powerful hieroglyphs carved into stele at the entrance to the mine, dedicated to Egyptian gods and the mighty pharaoh. It is the language of power. The language of your masters. And you cannot read a single word of it. It might as well be Martian. And right here, in this intersection of power and powerlessness, we find the first major break in our case. These miners, instead of trying to climb the unclimbable mountain of learning the entire Egyptian system, did something both simple and world-changingly brilliant. They looked at the pictures, and they stole them. But critically, they didn't steal their meanings. They just stole their shapes to represent the sounds from their own language. This is the moment. The conceptual leap. This is the hack. It's called the acrophonic principle. And it's so elegant it feels like cheating. Let's put ourselves in the mind of the inventor. You need a way to write down the words you speak. You're surrounded by pictures. Let's start with the word for ox. In your Canaanite language, that word is aleph. You see the Egyptian hieroglyph for an ox head. It's simple. A triangle with two horns. You look at that picture, and you make a decision. A revolutionary one. This picture will no longer mean ox. From now on, it will only represent the very first sound you make when you say the word aleph. That initial, silent catch in your throat. A glottal stop. The sound. You have stripped a picture of its meaning and given it a purely phonetic job. Okay, what's next? You see the hieroglyph for a house. It's a simple, boxy floor plan. The word for house in your language is bet. Perfect. You steal that shape. It no longer means house. It now stands only for the first sound you make when you say bet. The b sound. You see a wavy line representing water. Your word for water is mem. You take the wavy line. It no longer means water. It's now the symbol for the m sound. Are you seeing the sheer, raw genius of this? They weren't drawing the world anymore. They were drawing the sounds of their own mouths. They had forged a key. A simple mnemonic device. To remember the sound the letter makes, just remember the name of the picture it was stolen from. A is for aleph, an ox. B is for bet, a house. This single trick collapses the entire system. You don't need 1,000 signs anymore. You just need one for each fundamental consonant in your language. About 22 of them. They reduce the entire universe of ideas, objects, actions, and emotions, everything you could ever want to say, down to 22 basic Lego bricks of sound. And with those bricks, you could build any word you could speak. This was a complete and total paradigm shift. It was the moment writing pivoted from being about sight to being about sound. It was the birth of a tool for the masses. It was the alphabet. Now, a brilliant idea whispered in a forgotten mine shaft is just a secret. For a hack to become a revolution, it needs a distribution network. If the invention of the alphabet was a garage startup in the Sinai, the Phoenicians were the venture capitalists with a global shipping network who took it public. But before we get to them, we have to pause at a crucial crime scene that proves this alphabetic thinking wasn't some lucky, one-off fluke. Far to the north of Egypt, in the ancient Syrian port city of Ugarit, archaeologists were excavating a palace and unearthed entire libraries of clay tablets dating to around 1400 to 1200 BC. And what they found there was astonishing. It was an alphabet. But a completely different one. This system used cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script of the powerful Mesopotamian empires. But it wasn't the old, labyrinthine cuneiform with its hundreds of signs. The scribes at Ugarit had ingeniously adapted the wedge shapes to create a lean, efficient, 30-character alphabet. This is a critical piece of corroborating evidence. It tells us that the pressure was on. In the late Bronze Age, the world was becoming more connected. Trade routes were flourishing. Empires were corresponding. The old, slow, cumbersome writing systems were a bottleneck. Humanity was straining against its own informational limits. The idea of an alphabet wasn't an accident, it was an inevitability. Two different cultures, solving the same problem, arrived at the same fundamental solution. The human mind was ready to make this leap. So, two alphabetic systems emerged. The wedge-shaped cuneiform on heavy clay tablets, and the simple, linear scratches developed by those Canaanite workers. Which system would win? Which would survive the coming Bronze Age collapse and go on to shape the future? The market was about to decide. And that market was dominated by the most pragmatic, unsentimental, and influential people of the age, the Phoenicians. Starting around 1050 BC, these master sailors and traders, based in bustling port cities like Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, became the lords of the Mediterranean. They weren't empire builders with vast armies. They were the world's great middlemen. Their empire was one of commerce, a network of harbors and contracts. Picture a dock in the city of Tyre. It's chaos. The air is thick with the smell of cedar wood, salted fish, and exotic spices. Sailors from Egypt, Cyprus, Greece, and Sicily are shouting in a dozen different languages. A merchant is trying to log a shipment of purple dye, his city's famous export, while simultaneously negotiating the price for a cargo of Spanish tin. He doesn't have a decade to attend scribal school. He doesn't have time for poetry on stone. He needs a tool that moves at the speed of commerce. He needs something fast, cheap, flexible, and portable. He finds the 22-sign system pioneered by his Canaanite cousins, and his people adopt it. Perfect it. They streamlined the letter forms, making them quicker to write. They established a standard 22-character set. This was the Phoenician al-Shari, a lean, mean, purely consonantal writing machine. And that lack of vowels was a feature, not a bug. It was a masterpiece of data compression perfectly tuned for Semitic languages. As we noted, in languages like Phoenician, Hebrew, and Arabic, the meaning is locked in the three-consonant root. Let's take the root SPR. It has to do with counting or recounting. From it you get sefer, book, sofer, scribe, and sipper, story. A native speaker's brain sees SPR and instantly fills in the appropriate vowels from the context. It's an incredibly efficient system. And the Phoenicians, being pragmatists, put it on the most practical media available. They wrote it in ink on sheets of papyrus from Egypt, which could be rolled up and carried on a ship. For quick notes, receipts, and temporary records, they used ostraca, shards of broken pottery, which were literally free garbage. This was writing for the real world. For the workshop, not just the palace. For the accountant, not just the priest. And as their purple-sailed ships connected the world, their alphabet sailed with them. They didn't impose it, they simply used it. And people everywhere saw its power and copied it. It was open-source technology. On the island of Sardinia, we find the Nora stone. In Jordan, the Moabite stone. In Judah, desperate messages scrawled by soldiers during a siege. The system was spreading like a virus, because it was simply better than what came before. But there's one more layer to their genius that we have to talk about. It wasn't just the letters themselves that were a technology. It was their order. At sites like Izbet Sartah, we find those practice sheets, the abecedaries, where a student has scrawled out the whole alphabet in sequence, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, all the way to Tav. This isn't a message. It's a system update being installed in someone's brain. Why is that order so important? Because alphabetic order is an algorithm. It's a universal, arbitrary system for sorting information. Before this, how would you organize a list? Probably by importance, the king, then his general, then his advisors. Or by category, all the gods, then all the humans. The order depended on the list maker's personal judgment. But with alphabetic order, you have an objective, repeatable filing system for knowledge. Anyone, anywhere, can take a pile of documents and put them in the exact same order. It is the birth of the index. The invention of random access memory for culture. It's the direct, unbroken ancestor of the encyclopedia, the phone book, the library card catalog, and the very way files are stored on your computer. The order itself became a technology, a tool for taming the chaos of information and making it instantly retrievable. The Phoenicians didn't just give the world letters, they gave it a way to control them. So we have the invention, a brilliant hack. We have the distribution network, the Phoenician trade routes. But the final question is why this specific system achieved near-total global domination. Why are you reading these letters right now, and not a descendant of cuneiform or hieroglyphics? The answer, as it so often is economics. But not just the economics of money. The economics of cognition. The cost of learning. Let's run the numbers. The training cost for the old system, the scribal schools of Egypt and Mesopotamia, was staggering. A decade or more of a person's life, dedicated to nothing but learning a complex and arcane script. This created a tiny, privileged class of literates, the information 1%. They were a cartel, and their product was the written word. The training cost for the new system, the Phoenician alphabet? Weeks. Maybe a couple of months. Any motivated person, a sailor, a merchant, a foreman, could learn the 22 signs and the acrophonic principle behind them. The barrier to entry didn't just get lower, it was dynamited. This was the single greatest democratization of information in human history until the printing press. Suddenly, a potter could scratch his own name on his wares. A caravan leader could keep his own inventory. A wife could send a personal message to her husband at war. Power, which is inextricably linked to the control of information, began to leak out from the palaces and temples and into the streets and marketplaces. Then there was the cost of media. Hieroglyphics were perfect for carving into eternal stone monuments. Cuneiform was suited for durable clay tablets. These are technologies of permanence, of authority, of the state. The alphabet, as we've seen, thrived on the ephemeral and the cheap. Papyrus and pottery. It was the technology of the everyday, of business, of the now. This fundamental shift in media changed what writing was even for. It was no longer just a tool for kings to boast about their victories. It was a tool for people to record their lives. But the system's most profound feature was its ability to replicate and evolve. Like a snippet of powerful DNA, it was simple enough to copy with high fidelity, but flexible enough to adapt to new environments. As it spread to new cultures and new languages, it mutated. And one of those mutations, one of those upgrades, would change the world all over again. This brings us to the Greeks. Around the 8th century BC, the Greeks, emerging from their own dark age, encountered the Phoenicians and their incredible writing technology. They immediately saw its potential and borrowed it. But they had a bug. A serious compatibility issue. Greek is an Indo-European language. Its meaning isn't locked in consonantal roots like in Semitic languages. Vowels aren't optional decorations, they are critical, load-bearing parts of the word. Writing Greek with only consonants would be like trying to describe a rainbow in black and white. It would be a sea of ambiguity. How would you write down the epic poetry of Homer, with its precise meter and rhythm? How would you capture the subtle, complex arguments of a philosopher? You couldn't. Not accurately. So the Greeks, in a stroke of adaptive genius, performed the next great hack. They became the first programmers to truly debug the alphabet's code. They looked at the Phoenician character set and noticed a few letters that stood for guttural sounds that didn't exist in the Greek language. To a Greek ear, these letters were silent. They were available. They were in used code. Take the first letter, Aleph. That Phoenician glottal stop. The Greeks couldn't even hear it. So they took that ox head symbol, which they called alpha, and they reassigned it. It would no longer stand for a consonant at all. It would now represent the pure vowel sound a. The Phoenician letter, he, became the Greek vowel epsilon, e. Yod became iota, I. The guttural ayin was repurposed as the vowel omicron, o. Vav was adapted into upsilon, u. In a single, elegant move, they invented vowels. They created the world's first true alphabet, a complete toolkit for recording the full spectrum of human speech, both consonants and vowels. This changed everything. Again. Now, for the first time in history, language could be frozen with near-perfect phonetic precision. A song could be written down and sung 1,000 years later by someone who had never heard the melody. A philosophical argument could be preserved, free from the corruption of memory. A play could be performed with the exact rhythm and cadence the author intended. This new, upgraded software allowed Greek culture to explode. It was the catalyst for the flourishing of their literature, science, and democracy. From Greece, this version 2.0 alphabet was passed to the Etruscans in Italy, and then to a small, ambitious city on the Tiber River, Rome. The Romans adapted it for their language, Latin, and as their legions built an empire, they took that alphabet with them. They were the Microsoft of the ancient world, bundling this incredible technology with their imperial operating system, ensuring its installation across the entire known world. So that's the journey. From a dusty mine to a Roman legion, a 1,500-year story. It's fascinating history. But it can feel distant. Abstract. Except it's not. It is the most intimate, immediate technology you are using at this very second. You are so deeply immersed in this ancient operating system that you don't even see it. It is the invisible architecture of your thoughts. Every time you open your phone and scroll through your contacts, Adams, Brown, Carter, you are executing the alphabetic order algorithm first drilled on a pottery sherd 3,000 years ago. Every time you type a search query, you are relying on a principle of indexing and information retrieval that was a world-changing innovation in the ancient Near East. The search bar is a direct descendant of the abecedaries. The keyboard on your screen or on your desk is a museum of this entire journey. The letter shapes themselves are fossils. That U type is still a ghost of an ox's head, flipped upside down by the Phoenicians and passed down through the millennia. That M is still the wavy line of the word for water, mem. The ancient code is right there, hiding in plain sight. And this core principle, compressing vast complexity into a tiny, reusable codebook, is a fundamental pattern of information itself. It didn't stop with the alphabet. We took all the letters, numbers, and symbols and compressed them into ASCII code, 128 characters to build the digital world. When that wasn't enough, we expanded it to Unicode. We took the infinite spectrum of reality and compressed it into a binary alphabet of just 2 signs, 1 and 0. Even life itself stumbled upon the same solution. Your DNA is a 4-letter alphabet, A, C, G, T, whose combinations write the instruction manual for a living being. It is all the same hack, discovered by biology, rediscovered by a miner, and perfected by cultures across time. The most profound legacy, though, is the way we teach our children. When we say A is for apple, B is for ball, we are, without even realizing it, using the exact same acrophonic mnemonic that the inventor used in that dark tunnel. We are teaching sounds by naming pictures. That 3,500-year-old software is still the core of our educational programming. We tend to think of our thoughts, our ideas, our very consciousness as something ethereal, something that lives inside our heads. But for the last 3.5 millennia, they have lived in a hack. An external hard drive for the human mind, built from 22 signs. Every email you write, every book you read, every text message you send is you performing a small miracle. You are taking the fleeting vibrations of your breath, the electrical storms in your brain, and you are fossilizing them into these ancient symbols. It is a miner's prayer in a dark tunnel, reaching out across the chasm of time, expecting to be seen, to be understood, and to have another human voice, another human mind, give it sound and life once again. This story is about a hack that created a new operating system for the human mind. But what was the source code? What were the strange, mysterious systems of writing that came before the alphabet, systems of knots, and clay tokens, and sealed envelopes that were themselves revolutionary? That's the prequel to our story, and the investigation is waiting for you right now, on the end screen. But for our archive today, I have one question. Do this for me, look down at your keyboard. Or just picture it in your mind. Stare at the letters as if you've never seen them before, just as abstract shapes. What's the one letter that looks the most alien to you? The strangest? I'm genuinely curious which ancient shape feels the weirdest to the modern eye. Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to be part of digging up more of these hidden codes that run our world, subscribing to this channel is the single best way to join the expedition. Thank you for digging with us.